The wind gauge trembled at 12 knots, gusting to 15 death to any precision shot beyond 2,000 meters. Maya Chen ignored the instrument entirely, feeling the air currents through her skin like a conductor reading music. 3,800 meters downrange, a single playing card, the ace of spades, fluttered against a white backdrop, held in place by nothing more than surgical tubing and stubborn determination. Atmospheric pressure dropping, her spotter Jake Morrison whispered through the cum. Humidity's climbing. Temperature differential between here and target is 0.7 degrees. Maya, this is impossible. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. She adjusted her position on the rocky outcrop, the custom-built 416 Barrett settled against her shoulder like an extension of her body. Through the Schmidt and Benderscope's crystal-clear optics, the playing card appeared no larger than a grain of rice dancing in the thermal waves. The black spade symbol wavered, disappeared, reappeared, a phantom target that had humbled the world's best shooters for 6 consecutive years. The impossible shot, they called it. Every precision shooting championship ended the same way. Competitors would attempt this legendary challenge, and every single one would fail. The mathematics alone were staggering. At 3,800 meters, even a 1-degree temperature variation could throw a bullet 18 inches off course. Wind deflection at that distance could measure in feet. The playing card itself measured only 3.5 inches tall by 2.5 wide, smaller than the margin of error for most of the world's premier marksmen. Maya had been the first woman ever invited to attempt it. Range verified at 3-7-9-8 meters. Jake continued his litany of impossibilities. Crosswind steady at 12 knots, 90 degrees to target. Barometric pressure 2-9-.8-7 and falling. Maya, even if you account for every variable perfectly, the bullet drop alone. I know. She breathed, never lifting her eye from the scope. The playing card filled her vision, that mocking spade symbol seeming to grin at her through the heat shimmer. She'd run the calculations 1,000 times. At this distance, her bullet would drop nearly 60 feet from muzzle to target, following a ballistic arc that would make a mathematician weep. The Coriolis effect, the Earth's rotation, would deflect the shot another 4 inches to the right. Wind would push it further still, but Maya had something the equations couldn't account for, an understanding of impossibility that transcended mathematics. Her finger found the trigger's sweet spot, that precise point where 2 pounds and 14 ounces of pressure would release devastation across 2 1/3 miles of Montana wilderness. Through the scope, the ace of spades steadied for just one perfect moment, suspended in crystalline stillness as if the entire world had paused to watch. "Send it," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible through her earpiece. Maya's world compressed to a single point of focus, the black spade symbol dancing in her crosshairs. Her heartbeat slowed to match the Earth's rotation. Her breathing synchronized with the wind's rhythm. Every muscle in her body relaxed except for the one finger that would determine whether 6 years of preparation had been worth the pain. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with controlled violence, sending a 750-grain bullet screaming across the Montana landscape at 2,700 feet per second. For the next 5.5 seconds, physics would determine whether Maya Chen had just accomplished the impossible or simply added her name to a very long list of failures. Through the scope, she watched the playing card's final dance. The story of Maya Chen's impossible shot began 23 years earlier in the basement of a rundown gun shop in Missoula, Montana. 8-year-old Maya stood on a milk crate, struggling to see over the counter while her father conducted business with Harold Kowalski, the shop's gruff owner. "Your daughter's got steady hands," Harold observed, watching Maya carefully examine an antique Springfield rifle mounted on the wall display. "Most kids would be grabbing at everything." She's just looking. Maya's always been patient. Her father replied in accented English. Dr. James Chen had immigrated from Taiwan 15 years earlier, bringing with him a mechanical engineering degree and an absolute belief that precision could solve any problem. She watches, learns, then acts. Harold lifted the Springfield from its mount, checking the action with practiced efficiency. This was my grandfather's rifle. Carried it through France in World War I. Want to know something interesting about precision shooting, little lady? Maya nodded solemnly, her dark eyes fixed on the weapon's elegant lines. Most folks think it's about the gun, Harold continued, his weathered hand stroking the well-worn stock. Better rifle, better scope, better ammunition. That'll make you a better shot, right? Wrong. It's all about the shooter. The rifle doesn't make the shot, the person behind it does. James Chen purchased a .22 caliber training rifle that day, along with Harold's promise to teach Maya proper shooting fundamentals. Neither man could have predicted they were setting in motion events that would culminate in the most legendary precision shot in modern history. Maya's first lesson took place the following Saturday on Harold's private range, a cleared meadow, bordered by pine trees and backed by a natural earthen berm. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and gun oil as Harold demonstrated proper shooting stance. Feet shoulder width apart, he instructed, positioning Maya behind the shooting bench, rifle nestled in your shoulder pocket, not on top of the shoulder where it'll bruise you. Support hand under the stock, trigger hand, with just the pad of your index finger on the trigger face. Maya absorbed every detail with the intense concentration that would later make her famous. At 8 years old, she possessed an unusual ability to remain perfectly still for extended periods, a trait that worried her teachers but delighted Harold. Now, the most important part, Harold said, crouching beside her. Breathing. You breathe in, breathe out naturally, then hold it right at the natural pause. That's when you fire. Never hold your breath forcefully. That'll make you shake. The target stood 50 feet downrange, a standard bullseye with a 1-inch center. Ring. For a beginning shooter with a .22 caliber rifle, hitting anywhere on the paper would be considered success. Maya's first shot punched through the 8 ring, 2 inches from center. Beginner's luck, Harold muttered, but his eyes had narrowed with interest at her second shot landed in the 9 ring. The third shot, after Harold's gentle correction to her sight alignment, struck the 10 ring dead center. James Chen lowered his binoculars, speaking in rapid Mandarin to his daughter. Maya replied in the same language, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. She says shooting is just engineering, James translated for Harold. Consistent inputs produce consistent outputs. She wants to know why people think it's difficult. Harold studied the 8-year-old girl who had just demonstrated shooting ability that typically took months to develop. Maya, how did you know where the bullet would go? I looked through the scope, saw where the crosshairs pointed, and squeezed the trigger when everything was still, she replied simply. The bullet went where I aimed it. Why wouldn't it? That question would drive Maya's shooting development for the next 15 years. While other children played video games or watched television, Maya spent weekends at Harold's range, methodically working through increasingly challenging shooting scenarios. She approached each target with scientific precision, maintaining detailed logs of atmospheric conditions, ammunition performance, and accuracy results. By age 12, Maya could consistently place 10 shots within a 1-inch group at 200 yards performance. That surpassed many adult competitive shooters. Her success earned her a spot on the Missoula High School rifle team, where she began competing in junior precision shooting tournaments across the Pacific Northwest. Coach Patricia Williams had coached precision shooting for 18 years, developing several state champions and 2 collegiate All-Americans. She had never encountered a shooter like Maya Chen. The girl doesn't miss, Patricia confided to her assistant during Maya's sophomore year. I've watched her fire thousands of rounds over 2 years. She has missed exactly 7 shots, and I can tell you the specific reason for every single one. Crosswind gust she didn't account for, scope adjustment she forgot to dial in, ammunition from a bad lot. When everything is perfect, Maya literally cannot miss. Maya's reputation spread throughout Montana's competitive shooting community. By her junior year in high school, she dominated every tournament she entered, winning state championships in both precision rifle and long-range disciplines. College recruiters from across the country sent letters offering full scholarships. But Maya had bigger ambitions than collegiate competition. "I want to attempt the impossible shot," she announced to Harold during a training session the week after her 18th birthday. Harold's reaction was immediate and forceful. "Absolutely not. Maya, you're the most talented shooter I've ever seen, but that challenge isn't meant to be completed. It's meant to humble people, remind them that some things can't be conquered through skill alone." The impossible shot had gained legendary status in precision shooting circles over the previous decade. Originally conceived as a publicity stunt by Barrett Firearms Manufacturing, the challenge involved hitting a playing card at an unprecedented distance using any rifle and ammunition combination the competitor chose. The distance had started at 2,500 meters, already an extraordinary challenge, but had been extended twice as technology and shooter skill improved. At its current 3,800-meter distance, the impossible shot represented the absolute limit of what physics would theoretically allow. The bullet would travel for nearly 6 seconds, dropping 58 feet from its initial trajectory while being pushed sideways by wind, affected by the Earth's rotation, and subject to atmospheric conditions that could vary significantly between firing position and target. 47 of the world's best precision shooters have attempted it, Harold continued. Military snipers, Olympic champions, world record holders, every single one has failed. The closest anyone has come was Tommy Martinez in 2019. His bullet passed within 6 inches of the card. Maya's dark eyes held the same steady intensity Harold remembered from that first day in his gun shop. "What if I could do it?" "You can't," Harold replied flatly. "Maya, I believe you're capable of incredible things, but this isn't about skill anymore. It's about the limits of human capability. Even if you execute everything perfectly, atmospheric variations beyond your control will defeat the shot." "What if they don't?" Harold studied his protege, recognizing the quiet determination that had driven every breakthrough in her shooting development. Maya had never accepted limitations, viewing every challenge as a puzzle to be solved through careful analysis and perfect execution. "If you could somehow accomplish it," Harold said finally, "you'd be the greatest precision shooter in human history." "But Maya, the cost of failure." "I won't fail," Maya interrupted. "I don't miss." That conversation set in motion 18 months of the most intensive training regimen ever attempted by a precision shooter. Maya postponed college acceptance, dedicating herself entirely to understanding every variable that could affect a bullet's trajectory over 3,800 meters. She studied meteorology, learning to predict wind patterns and atmospheric pressure changes. She mastered advanced ballistics calculations, accounting for factors like bullet yaw, gyroscopic drift, and atmospheric density variations. She worked with ammunition manufacturers to develop the most consistent cartridges possible, weighing individual bullets to ensure uniform mass distribution. Most importantly, she learned to shoot in conditions that would defeat lesser marksmen. Harold constructed training scenarios that simulated the worst possible atmospheric variables: crosswinds up to 20 knots, temperature differentials exceeding 5 degrees, and barometric pressure swings that would challenge even the most sophisticated ballistic computers. Maya adapted to each challenge with methodical precision, developing an intuitive understanding of bullet behavior that transcended mathematical calculation. She learned to feel atmospheric conditions through her skin, sensing pressure changes minutes before weather instruments could detect them. She's developing what I call environmental awareness, Patricia Williams observed during one of Maya's training sessions. Most shooters rely on instruments to tell them about wind and weather conditions. Maya has learned to become her own instrument. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Maya's shooting had evolved from technical proficiency to something approaching artistry. She could place bullets with precision that defied explanation, consistently achieving accuracy levels that ballistic computers suggested should be impossible. Jake Morrison joined Maya's training team during her final 6 months of preparation. A former Marine Corps scout sniper with 3 combat deployments and 2 confirmed kills beyond 1,500 meters, Jake brought real-world experience to Maya's technical expertise. "Your fundamentals are flawless," Jake assessed after watching Maya shoot for the first time. "Better than anyone I've seen, including instructors at the Marine Corps' Mountain Warfare Training Center. But long-range shooting in competition is different from long-range shooting when lives depend on it." Jake introduced Maya to psychological pressure training, forcing her to attempt precision shots while subjected to stress, fatigue, and deliberate distractions. He taught her to maintain focus despite equipment failures, weather changes, and time pressure. "The impossible shot isn't just about ballistics," Jake explained during a particularly challenging training session. "It's about performing under pressure that would crush most shooters. When you're standing behind that rifle with the entire shooting community watching, your heart rate will spike, your breathing will change, and every small doubt you've ever had will try to surface." Maya proved as adaptable to psychological training as she had been to technical challenges. Jake pushed her through scenarios designed to break concentration and induce performance anxiety, but Maya's responses remained consistent. Analyze the problem, adapt to the conditions, execute the shot. "I've never seen anything like it," Jake confided to Harold after 6 months of training. "Most people have emotional responses to pressure that affect their physical performance. Maya treats pressure like another environmental variable to account for. She doesn't get nervous, she gets more focused." By the time Maya registered for the annual Precision Shooting Championship, where the impossible shot would be attempted, her training had reached levels that bordered on obsession. She could predict atmospheric conditions hours in advance, calculate complex ballistic solutions in her head, and place bullets with consistency that amazed even Harold. But the impossible shot had defeated 47 world-class shooters before her. Physics and probability suggested that Maya would simply become number 48 on the list of failures. Maya disagreed with physics and probability, why Dr. Sarah Martinez adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses and squinted at the ballistic computer screen, numbers cascading across the display in bewildering complexity. As the chief engineer for Barrett Firearms Manufacturing and the designer of the Impossible Shot Challenge, she had spent considerable time explaining to journalists and competitors why the shot was quite literally impossible. "The mathematics are unforgiving," she explained to the documentary crew filming preparation for this year's championship. "At 3,800 meters, we're pushing the absolute boundaries of what rifle, cartridge, and shooter can achieve working in perfect harmony." The cameraman zoomed in on the computer display, showing trajectory calculations for the impossible shot. Red warning indicators flashed across multiple variables, each representing a factor that could cause catastrophic failure. "Let's start with bullet drop," Dr. Martinez continued, pointing to a parabolic curve on the screen. "A 750 grain .416 Barrett bullet fired at 2,700 feet per second will drop approximately 58 feet, over 3,800 meters. That's a 5-story building. The shooter must aim almost 60 feet above a target that's only 3.5 inches tall." She clicked to the next screen, revealing wind deflection calculations. Crosswind deflection is even more challenging. A 10-knot crosswind, barely noticeable to most people, will push that bullet nearly 40 inches off course at maximum range. Since wind conditions rarely remain constant across 3,800 meters of terrain, the shooter must predict and compensate for wind variations they cannot directly observe. The documentary director leaned forward with interest. What about other factors? I've heard there are dozens of variables that can affect the shot. Dozens is conservative, Dr. Martinez replied with a wry smile. Atmospheric pressure affects air density, which changes bullet velocity and trajectory. Temperature differences between firing position and target create thermal currents that can deflect the bullet unpredictably. Humidity affects air density differently than pressure. The Coriolis effect, Earth's rotation, will deflect the bullet 4 inches to the right at this range. She opened another screen displaying atmospheric modeling data. But here's what makes the shot truly impossible. Atmospheric conditions aren't uniform across 3,800 meters of distance. The bullet might encounter headwinds for the first 1,000 meters, crosswinds for the next 1,000, and completely different conditions for the final portion of flight. No shooter can possibly account for atmospheric variations they cannot measure. The documentary crew captured Dr. Martinez pulling up historical data from previous impossible shot attempts. Names of legendary shooters scrolled past. Olympic champions, military snipers, world record holders. Every single entry ended with the same result: miss. Tommy Martinez came closest in 2019, Dr. Martinez noted, highlighting his attempt. His bullet passed 6 inches from the playing card, an extraordinary achievement considering the distance involved. But 6 inches might as well be 6 feet when your target is only 3.5 inches tall. She paused the display on Martinez's data. Look at his environmental conditions that day. Near perfect weather, minimal wind, stable atmospheric pressure. He had ideal conditions and still missed by 6 inches. The mathematical reality is that even perfect execution isn't enough. The documentary director asked the question everyone wanted answered. So why continue the challenge if it's impossible? Dr. Martinez's expression grew thoughtful. Because impossibility is a moving target. 50 years ago, a 1,000-meter shot was considered impossible. 20 years ago, most people thought 2,000 meters was the practical limit. Human capability keeps expanding, pushing against the boundaries of what physics allows. She gestured toward the computer screen filled with complex calculations. The impossible shot represents the current limit of human achievement in precision shooting. We've calculated that under perfect conditions, no wind, uniform temperature, stable atmospheric pressure, the shot is theoretically achievable. But perfect conditions don't exist in nature. Has anyone come close to perfect conditions? Never, Dr. Martinez replied without hesitation. We've monitored atmospheric conditions during every attempt over 6 years. There's always wind, always temperature variation, always some factor that introduces error into the equation. That's why it remains impossible. What Dr. Martinez didn't know was that Maya Chen had spent the past 18 months developing techniques that challenged her fundamental assumptions about precision shooting limitations, while traditional shooters relied on instruments and calculations to predict atmospheric conditions. Maya had learned to sense environmental changes through direct observation and physical awareness. Her training regimen included exercises designed to heighten sensitivity to air pressure, humidity, and temperature variations that couldn't be measured by conventional equipment. Jake Morrison had introduced Maya to military techniques used by elite sniper units operating in extreme conditions where electronic equipment might fail or prove inadequate. These methods involved reading atmospheric conditions through observation of natural indicators, dust movement, vegetation behavior, thermal shimmer patterns, and subtle changes in light refraction. Instruments tell you what conditions were, Jake explained during a training session conducted in rapidly changing weather. But conditions are constantly evolving. A good shooter learns to predict what conditions will be when the bullet reaches the target 5 or 6 seconds after firing. Maya's training progressed beyond instrument dependence to intuitive environmental awareness. She could predict wind pattern changes by observing cloud formation, sense atmospheric pressure variations through subtle changes in sound transmission, and detect thermal currents by watching heat shimmer behavior through her rifle scope. She's developing capabilities I've never seen before, Harold confided to Patricia Williams during one of Maya's final training sessions. Yesterday she called a wind shift 40 seconds before it happened, then placed 3 consecutive shots through the same hole at 1,200 meters. She's not just reading conditions, she's predicting them. Maya's ballistic preparation went beyond traditional calculation methods. Working with ammunition manufacturers, she had developed cartridges with consistency levels that exceeded military specification requirements. Each bullet was weighed individually, sorted by mass variation within 0.1 grains, and loaded with powder charges measured to 0.02 grain. Accuracy. Her rifle represented the pinnacle of precision engineering. A custom Barrett .416 with a barrel palo, manufactured to tolerances typically reserved for laboratory instruments. The action had been blueprinted and stress-relieved. The trigger adjusted to break cleanly at exactly 2 pounds and 14 ounces. The Schmidt and Bender scope featured the finest optics available, with adjustments that could be made in quarter-minute increments. But Maya's greatest advantage lay in her approach to the shooting challenge itself. While previous competitors had treated the impossible shot as an exercise in ballistic calculation, Maya viewed it as a puzzle requiring perfect synchronization between human capability and environmental conditions. Every shot has a moment when all variables align, Maya explained to Jake during their final training session. The wind pauses, atmospheric pressure stabilizes, thermal currents settle. Most shooters try to force the shot during imperfect conditions. I'll wait for the perfect moment. Jake studied his protege through binoculars as she settled behind her rifle for a practice shot at 2,800 meters. Maya's approach differed fundamentally from every precision shooter he had observed during his military career. Where others sought to minimize variables through calculation and prediction, Maya sought to understand variables so completely that she could recognize the brief moments when they temporarily negated each other. Range is 2,800 meters, Jake called through the radio. Wind is variable, 8 to 12 knots from the southwest. Atmospheric pressure holding steady. Temperature differential negligible. Maya made subtle adjustments to her scope settings, compensating for the measured environmental conditions. But Jake noticed she didn't fire immediately, instead maintaining her position behind the rifle while studying the target through her optics. Minutes passed. The wind continued gusting unpredictably, creating conditions that would challenge any precision shot. Most shooters would have abandoned the attempt or accepted reduced accuracy expectations. Maya waited. Suddenly, her breathing pattern changed to the controlled rhythm that preceded every shot. Jake focused his spotting scope on the target, watching for impact. The rifle's report echoed across the valley. Through his optics, Jake watched the bullet strike the exact center of a playing card, mounted 2,800 meters downrange, splitting it cleanly in half. Perfect hit, Jake reported, his voice reflecting amazement despite months of observing Maya's extraordinary shooting ability. How did you know when to fire? The wind paused for 3 seconds, Maya replied, her voice calm and matter of fact. Temperature equilibrium stabilized. Atmospheric pressure held constant. All variables aligned simultaneously. Jake lowered his binoculars, studying Maya with new understanding. She wasn't just an exceptionally skilled shooter, she had developed an intuitive connection to environmental conditions that allowed her to recognize moments of perfect ballistic opportunity. "Maya, what you just did shouldn't be possible," Jake said slowly. "Reading environmental conditions that precisely predicting the exact moment when variables align, I've never seen anything like it." Maya's response would prove prophetic. The impossible shot isn't about overcoming environmental variables. It's about recognizing the moment when they cancel each other out. 3 weeks later, Maya Chen would stand behind her rifle at the Precision Shooting Championship, facing 3,800 meters of Montana wilderness and a playing card that had humbled the world's greatest shooters. The mathematics of impossibility remained unchanged, but Maya had discovered something that transcended mathematical calculation. The perfect moment when impossibility briefly became possible. The Whitefish Range in northwest Montana provided a spectacular backdrop for the annual Precision Shooting Championship, but the competitors gathered at the registration tent were focused on more immediate concerns than mountain scenery. This year's field included 43 of the world's most accomplished marksmen, each carrying credentials that would intimidate amateur shooters and impress military professionals. Maya arrived at the competitors' briefing with Jake Morrison and Harold Kowalski, drawing immediate attention from veterans who had dominated precision shooting for decades. At 21 years old, Maya was not only the youngest competitor in the field, but also the first woman ever invited to attempt the impossible shot. "That's her," whispered Marcus Webb, a 3-time world champion who held the current record for the longest confirmed precision shot in competition at 3,247 meters. "The girl from Montana who's supposed to work miracles." Thomas Brennan, a former Navy SEAL whose shooting exploits had been featured in multiple documentaries, studied Maya with professional interest. "She looks like she's about 16. Are we sure she belongs here?" "Check her qualification scores," replied Carlos Mendez, whose precision shooting school had trained dozens of military and law enforcement snipers. "She submitted target groups. That shouldn't be possible. If those scores are legitimate, she might be the most accurate shooter any of us has ever seen." The murmur of conversation quieted as Dr. Sarah Martinez approached the podium to begin the official briefing. As the designer of the Impossible Shot Challenge, Dr. Martinez had presided over 6 years of attempts by the world's best shooters, watching each fail to overcome the mathematical certainties that made the shot impossible. "Welcome to the 7th Annual Impossible Shot Championship," Dr. Martinez began, her voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd. "This year's field includes 43 competitors from 12 countries, representing the highest level of precision shooting achievement in the world." She activated a large display screen showing the challenge setup. The target remains unchanged from previous years. A standard playing card, the Ace of Spades, positioned at exactly 3,800 meters from the firing position. Competitors may use any rifle and ammunition combination they choose. Weather conditions will be monitored continuously, with real-time data provided to all participants. Maya studied the display with the same intense concentration she brought to every aspect of shooting preparation. The firing position occupied a rocky outcrop overlooking a broad valley with the target mounted on a framework visible against a white backdrop. The terrain between firing position and target included rolling hills, a small stream, and patches of forest that could create unpredictable wind patterns. "Environmental conditions for today's attempts are challenging," Dr. Martinez continued. "Wind speeds are variable from 8 to 15 knots, with gusts potentially reaching 20 knots. Atmospheric pressure is stable but below normal for this elevation. Temperature differential between firing position and target is currently 1.2 degrees and climbing as the day warms." She paused, making eye contact with several competitors. "I want to emphasize again that this challenge represents the absolute limits of what physics allows. Over 6 years, 47 world-class shooters have attempted the impossible shot. The closest anyone has come was Tommy Martinez's bullet passing 6 inches from the target in 2019. Tommy Martinez himself sat in the front row, nodding acknowledgement of his near miss that had electrified the precision shooting community. His attempt had demonstrated that the shot was theoretically possible under perfect conditions, but had also highlighted how even microscopic errors could result in complete failure. Shooting order has been determined by random draw, Dr. Martinez announced, consulting her tablet. We'll begin at 0800 hours with 30-minute intervals between attempts. This schedule allows each shooter optimal preparation time while ensuring consistent atmospheric monitoring. Maya checked her shooting order, 37th out of 43 competitors. The late position would allow her to observe other attempts and gather additional environmental data, but it also meant waiting nearly 20 hours while atmospheric conditions potentially deteriorated. Each competitor will have one shot at the target, Dr. Martinez continued. You may take as much time as needed to prepare and aim, but once you begin your shooting sequence, no communication with coaches or spotters is permitted. Range safety. Officers will monitor all attempts with immediate disqualification for any unsafe gun handling. The briefing concluded with technical details about target verification, measurement procedures, and media protocols. Maya listened carefully to every aspect, though her mind was already processing the environmental challenges she would face. As competitors dispersed to examine equipment and review shooting plans, Maya found herself surrounded by curious veterans, eager to assess the young woman who had generated so much attention. "You're Maya Chen," stated Eric Larson, whose Norwegian accent carried the authority of someone who had dominated European precision shooting for 8 years. "Your qualification scores are impressive, but competition shooting at this level involves pressure that most people cannot handle." Maya met his gaze with quiet confidence. "I don't miss." The simple statement drew surprised laughter from several competitors. Such confidence would normally be dismissed as youthful arrogance, but Maya's tone carried no boastfulness, just matter-of-fact certainty. "Everyone misses eventually," replied Alexandra Petrov, a Russian shooter whose military background included classified long-range missions in hostile territory. "The impossible shot has defeated Olympic champions and world record holders. What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" "Because I understand why they failed," Maya replied simply. "They tried to overcome environmental variables instead of working with them." This response sparked intense discussion among the assembled shooters. Maya's implication that previous competitors had used flawed approaches challenged conventional wisdom about precision shooting at extreme ranges. "Environmental variables can't be controlled," Marcus Webb pointed out. "We measure conditions, calculate compensation, and execute the best shot possible under the circumstances. That's how long-range precision shooting works." Maya's dark eyes held the same steady intensity that Harold had noticed 13 years earlier in his gun shop. "What if there's a better way?" Before anyone could respond, Jake Morrison approached to escort Maya away from the growing crowd of questioners. As her spotter and coach, Jake understood that psychological warfare was already beginning, with veteran competitors attempting to plant seeds of doubt in Maya's mind. "Save the conversation for after you shoot," Jake advised quietly as they walked toward the competitor's preparation area. "Let your rifle do the talking." Maya nodded, but her attention had already shifted to more immediate concerns. Through binoculars, she studied the terrain between firing position and target, noting vegetation patterns that would reveal wind behavior, thermal currents visible through heat shimmer, and atmospheric conditions that instruments couldn't adequately measure. "Wind patterns are complex," Jake observed, following her gaze. "That valley creates unpredictable air movement, especially with the temperature differential increasing throughout the day." "The complexity is an advantage," Maya replied, adjusting her binoculars to examine specific areas along the bullet's projected flight path. Most shooters will wait for conditions to simplify. I'll shoot when they're complex but balanced. Jake had learned to trust Maya's counterintuitive approaches to shooting challenges, but her confidence still amazed him. Every other competitor was studying weather forecasts and calculating atmospheric compensation, seeking the most predictable conditions possible for their attempt. Maya was looking for the moment when unpredictable conditions would temporarily align in her favor. "Your shooting position is confirmed," Jake reported, consulting his notes from the range briefing. "Rocky outcrop with solid rest. Clear sight line to target. Good angles for wind observation. We'll have real-time atmospheric data and backup range cards for multiple scenarios." Maya examined their assigned shooting position through the binoculars, noting the natural rest points and wind indicators visible from that location. The position offered excellent stability and clear target visibility, but would require careful attention to thermal currents rising from sun-heated rocks below. Range estimation verified at 3-7-9-8 meters, Jake continued. Elevation difference is minimal. Target is actually 18 inches higher than firing position, which simplifies ballistic calculations. Temperature differential? Maya asked, still studying the target area through optics. 1.2 degrees currently, predicted to reach 2.5 degrees by afternoon. That could push your bullet impact up to 8 inches low if not compensated properly. Maya made mental notes about the thermal challenges she would face during her afternoon shooting slot. Temperature differentials created atmospheric density variations that affected bullet velocity and trajectory in subtle but critical ways. Atmospheric pressure? Holding steady at 20-9-.8-7 inches. But the weather forecast shows a potential front moving through later today. If pressure starts dropping during your attempt, bullet impact could be significantly affected. These variables would have concerned most shooters, representing uncontrollable factors that could defeat even perfect shooting technique. Maya viewed them as information to incorporate into her decision-making process. "Jake, I want to observe at least 10 attempts before my turn," Maya said, lowering her binoculars. "I need to understand how conditions are actually behaving, not just what the instruments predict." Jake nodded, recognizing Maya's practical approach to gathering environmental intelligence. While other competitors relied primarily on measured data and ballistic calculations, Maya preferred to observe how bullets actually behaved under real conditions. "The first shooter takes position in 6 hours, Jake noted. "That gives us time for equipment check, zero verification, and atmospheric monitoring setup." Maya's preparation routine had been refined through 18 months of intensive training. Every aspect was designed to ensure perfect equipment function and optimal shooting performance when her moment arrived. Her custom Barrett .416 rifle represented the pinnacle of precision engineering, with modifications that exceeded military specification requirements. The barrel had been manufactured to laboratory-grade tolerances, the action blueprinted and stress-relieved to eliminate mechanical variations. The trigger broke cleanly at exactly 2 pounds and 14 ounces, adjusted to Maya's specific preferences through thousands of practice shots. The Schmidt and Bender scope featured the finest optical components available, with crystal-clear lenses and adjustment mechanisms that could be set in precise quarter-minute increments. Maya had used this same scope rifle combination for the past year, developing intimate familiarity with its ballistic behavior under varied conditions. Her ammunition represented an even greater investment in consistency. Working with custom loading specialists, Maya had developed cartridges with uniformity levels that exceeded normal manufacturing tolerances. Each bullet had been individually weighed and sorted, powder charges measured to 0.02 grain accuracy, and cases prepared with laboratory precision. "Ammunition check complete," Jake reported after examining Maya's carefully organized shooting kit. 50 rounds available. All from the same lot, all verified to specification. Ballistic performance should be identical across all cartridges. Maya selected 5 rounds for her shooting attempt, 1 for the record shot and 4 backups in case of equipment malfunction or range safety issues. Each cartridge had been inspected multiple times and stored in protective cases to prevent damage. 0 verification in 30 minutes, Jake announced, consulting the competition schedule. Range safety has cleared the 200-meter practice range for competitor use. Maya's 0 verification process involved confirming that her rifle scope combination performed exactly as expected under current atmospheric conditions, even microscopic. Changes in temperature or humidity could affect bullet impact point, requiring precise adjustments to maintain accuracy. The practice range buzzed with activity as 43 world-class shooters conducted their final preparations. The sound of precision rifles echoed across the valley as competitors verified their equipment and practiced their shooting sequences under actual competition conditions. Maya's 0 verification session drew attention from other competitors and range officials. Her shooting process differed noticeably from conventional approaches, incorporating techniques that most precision shooters had never observed. "Watch her breathing pattern," Marcus Webb commented to his spotter, studying Maya through binoculars. "She's not following standard respiratory pause timing. She's synchronizing with something else." Maya's breathing had indeed adapted to match atmospheric rhythm rather than physiological patterns. Through months of training, she had learned to sense momentary stability in air movement, timing her shots to coincide with brief periods when wind and thermal currents temporarily balanced. Her first 0 verification shot struck the center of the target precisely, confirming that her rifle scope combination performed as expected under current conditions. But Maya fired 4 additional shots, placing them in a group smaller than a dime at 200 meters. "Group size under 1/4 inch, Jake reported with satisfaction. "Equipment is performing perfectly." Maya examined the target through her spotting scope, analyzing not just bullet placement, but also the shape and orientation of each hole. The precision of the grouping confirmed that her ammunition was performing consistently and her rifle was functioning without mechanical variation. "Scope tracking verified," Maya announced, having tested her optics ability to make precise adjustments. "Windage and elevation adjustments are responding exactly as calculated." With equipment verification complete, Maya shifted attention to environmental observation. While other competitors consulted weather instruments and ballistic computers, Maya studied atmospheric conditions through direct observation of natural indicators. "Wind patterns are establishing consistency," she noted, watching dust movement and vegetation behavior across the valley. "The morning thermal patterns are stabilizing, but that will change as surface temperatures increase." Jake monitored electronic weather instruments while Maya gathered environmental intelligence through observation. The combination of measured data and intuitive assessment provided comprehensive understanding of shooting conditions. "Barometric pressure holding steady," Jake reported. "Temperature rising slowly but uniformly. Wind speeds averaging 10 knots with gusts to 14 knots from the southwest." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Maya nodded but continued studying atmospheric behavior through her binoculars. Electronic instruments provided valuable baseline information, but they couldn't predict the momentary fluctuations that would determine shooting success or failure. "First shooter takes position in 2 hours, Jake announced. "We should observe." His attempt carefully to gather additional environmental data. Maya agreed, recognizing that each shooting attempt would provide valuable information about how bullets actually behaved under current conditions. While ballistic calculations offered theoretical predictions, observing real bullet impacts would reveal how atmospheric variables were actually affecting projectile flight. The competition area had been transformed into a sophisticated shooting environment with electronic timing systems, high-resolution cameras, and atmospheric monitoring equipment that provided real-time environmental data to competitors and spectators. Dr. Sarah Martinez supervised the final target setup, ensuring that the playing card was positioned precisely at 3,800 meters and secured against the moderate wind. The ace of spades fluttered slightly in the breeze, a small black symbol that appeared almost invisible from the firing position. Target is confirmed at 3-7-9-8 meters, the range officer announced over the public address system. Playing card is secured and visible. Range conditions are safe for competitor shooting. Maya studied the target through her powerful spotting scope, noting how the playing card moved in response to air currents at that distance. The target's behavior provided valuable information about wind conditions 3,800 meters downrange, information that no weather instrument could provide. From the firing position, card movement is minimal, Jake observed, watching through his own optics. Wind at target distance appears lighter than wind at firing position. This observation proved significant, as it suggested that atmospheric conditions varied across the bullet's flight path. Most shooters would attempt to average wind conditions between firing position and target, but Maya was developing a more sophisticated understanding of environmental variations. At exactly 0800 hours, Marcus Webb took position behind his custom Remington .300 Winchester Magnum, becoming the first shooter to attempt the impossible shot under this year's challenging conditions. Webb's credentials were impeccable: 3 world championships, multiple precision shooting records, and a reputation for performing under pressure that had made him the favorite among many observers. Maya positioned herself where she could observe Webb's shooting process while monitoring atmospheric conditions. Every attempt would provide valuable data about environmental behavior that could inform her own strategy. Wind is steady at 12 knots from the southwest, the range officer announced. Atmospheric pressure 20-9-.8-6 inches. Temperature differential between firing position and target is 1.4 degrees. Webb took his time settling into position, making precise adjustments to his rifle rest and scope settings. His preparation was methodical and professional, reflecting decades of experience in high-pressure shooting situations. Through her spotting scope, Maya watched Webb's shooting process with intense concentration. His breathing pattern was textbook perfect, his trigger control smooth and consistent. When Webb fired, his bullet placement was exactly where ballistic calculations predicted should be 3 inches to the left of the playing card. Miss by 3 inches left, the range officer announced. Excellent shot placement, but off target. Webb's attempt generated immediate discussion among the watching competitors. His shot had been technically perfect, executed exactly according to ballistic predictions, yet had still missed the target by a narrow margin. Wind deflection was greater than calculated, Carlos Mendez observed to his shooting partner. Either wind speed was higher than measured, or atmospheric density was different than predicted. Maya had reached a different conclusion. Webb's bullet impact suggested that he had compensated for average wind conditions across the entire flight path, but actual wind behavior had been more complex. The bullet had encountered stronger crosswinds during the middle portion of its trajectory, creating additional deflection that averaged measurements couldn't predict. Environmental conditions aren't uniform across 3,800 meters, Maya said quietly to Jake. Webb's calculations assumed consistent atmospheric density and wind speed. Real conditions are more variable. The second shooter, Alexandra Petrov, took position 40 minutes later. Her approach differed from Webb's, incorporating Soviet-era shooting techniques developed for extreme-range military applications. Petrov's rifle was a custom .338 Lapua Magnum known for exceptional accuracy at long distances. Atmospheric pressure dropping slightly, the range officer announced. Wind has increased to 14 knots, gusting to 16 knots. Temperature differential now 1.6 degrees. Petrov adapted her shooting solution to account for changing conditions, making scope adjustments based on updated atmospheric measurements. Her preparation was efficient and confident, reflecting extensive experience shooting under challenging conditions. Petrov's shot struck 4 inches high, and 2 inches right of the playing card, closer than Webb's attempt, but still a clear miss. Atmospheric conditions are changing faster than calculations can accommodate, Jake observed, noting the difference between Petrov's predicted impact point and actual bullet placement. Maya nodded, recognizing a pattern in the early attempts. Both Webb and Petrov had executed technically excellent shots based on accurate ballistic calculations, yet both had missed because atmospheric conditions were more dynamic than measured data suggested. They're treating this like a precision shooting exercise, Maya said, watching the third shooter take position. But atmospheric conditions at 3,800 meters behave more like weather patterns. You can't calculate weather, you have to read it. The third attempt, by Norwegian shooter Erik Larsen, resulted in another near miss, 2 inches low and 5 inches left. Larsen's bullet impact suggested that atmospheric pressure had continued dropping during his shooting sequence, affecting bullet velocity and trajectory. 3 excellent shots, 3 misses, Dr. Sarah Martinez announced to the gathered crowd. Each attempt demonstrates the extraordinary difficulty of the impossible shot challenge. But Maya was learning valuable lessons from each failure. The pattern of bullet impacts revealed that atmospheric conditions were changing continuously throughout the morning, creating environmental variations that couldn't be predicted by conventional measurement and calculation. Wind speed is increasing, Jake noted, monitoring his instruments. Pressure continues dropping. Temperature differential is growing as the day warms. These changing conditions would have discouraged most shooters, representing uncontrollable variables that made accurate shooting increasingly difficult. Maya viewed the changes as opportunities to gather additional environmental intelligence. The fourth shooter, Thomas Brennan, attempted a different approach. Instead of relying primarily on calculated atmospheric compensation, Brennan waited for what appeared to be a lull in wind activity before firing. His bullet passed within 1 inch of the playing card, the closest attempt so far. Outstanding. Shot by Brennan, the range officer announced. Bullet impact 1 inch high, dead center for windage. Exceptional marksmanship. Brennan's near success excited the crowd and generated intense discussion among competitors. His approach of waiting for improved conditions had nearly succeeded, suggesting that timing might be more important than calculation. He recognized a wind lull and took advantage of it, Carlos Mendez observed approvingly. That's real-world shooting wisdom. Maya had observed something different in Brennan's attempt. Rather than waiting for truly optimal conditions, Brennan had fired when wind appeared to calm, but thermal currents were actually increasing due to rising temperatures. His bullet had been deflected by atmospheric conditions that weren't visible. Through conventional observation, Brennan's timing was good but incomplete, Maya explained to Jake. He read wind patterns correctly, but didn't account for thermal currents that were starting to build. Jake studied Maya with growing understanding of her unique approach to environmental assessment. While other shooters focused on single atmospheric variables, Maya was developing a comprehensive picture of all environmental factors. Simultaneously, the morning progressed with a parade of world-class shooters attempting the impossible shot, each bringing different techniques and strategies to the challenge. Olympic champion David Park fired a shot that missed by 18 inches when a sudden wind gust caught his bullet mid-flight. Former military sniper Maya Chen placed his bullet within 4 inches of the target, demonstrating exceptional skill. Under pressure. By noon, 15 shooters had attempted the challenge with varying degrees of success, but none had achieved the precision necessary to actually hit the playing card. The closest attempts had come within 1 to 2 inches extraordinary accuracy considering the distance involved, but still failures according to the challenge requirements. Environmental conditions are becoming more challenging, Dr. Sarah Martinez announced during the lunch break. Wind speeds have increased to 16 knots with gusts to 20 knots. Temperature differential has reached 2.3 degrees. Atmospheric pressure continues dropping. These deteriorating conditions concerned most of the remaining competitors, who recognized that afternoon shooting would be significantly more difficult than morning attempts. Higher winds, greater temperature differentials, and unstable atmospheric pressure would make precise shooting increasingly challenging. Maya viewed the changing conditions differently. While individual environmental variables were becoming more extreme, the complexity was also creating opportunities for momentary stability when multiple factors temporarily aligned. Afternoon conditions will be more dynamic, Maya observed to Jake while studying atmospheric behavior through her binoculars. More variables means more opportunity for perfect moments. Jake had learned to trust Maya's counterintuitive assessment of shooting conditions, but her confidence in the face of deteriorating weather still amazed him. Every other competitor was expressing concern about afternoon shooting, while Maya seemed increasingly optimistic about her chances. "Your shooting slot is 5 hours away," Jake noted, checking the competition schedule. "Conditions will be significantly worse by then." "Conditions will be different," Maya corrected. "Different isn't necessarily worse if you understand how to work with complexity instead of against it." The afternoon shooting session began with Tommy Martinez, the only shooter who had previously come close to completing the impossible shot. Martinez's 2019 attempt had passed within 6 inches of the target under nearly ideal conditions, earning him legendary status in the precision shooting community. This year's conditions bore no resemblance to the calm weather that had favored Martinez's previous attempt. Wind gusted unpredictably across the valley. Thermal currents created visible heat shimmer, and atmospheric pressure continued its slow decline. "Wind is gusting to 22 knots, the range officer announced. "Atmospheric pressure 20-9-.7-9 inches. Temperature differential 2.8 degrees and climbing." Martinez adapted his shooting strategy to account for the challenging conditions, making conservative atmospheric compensation while waiting for the most stable moment possible to fire. His experience and reputation had earned him respect from every competitor present. Martinez's shot missed the target by 8 inches farther than his legendary 2019 attempt, but still an impressive achievement under difficult conditions. "Even Martinez couldn't handle today's conditions," Eric Larson commented to his spotter. "If he can't succeed, what hope do the rest of us have?" Maya had observed something significant in Martinez's attempt that other competitors missed. His bullet impact suggested that he had overcompensated for wind conditions, applying atmospheric corrections based on maximum measured wind speed rather than actual wind behavior when he fired. Martinez tried to overcome the conditions instead of working with them, Maya explained to Jake. He calculated compensation for worst-case wind speed, but actual conditions when he fired were more moderate. This observation reinforced Maya's fundamental approach to the impossible shot. Rather than trying to defeat atmospheric variables through calculation and compensation, she was learning to recognize moments when variables temporarily canceled each other out. The afternoon continued with increasingly challenging shooting conditions as thermal heating intensified wind patterns and atmospheric instability. Shots that would have been considered exceptional under normal circumstances missed the target by margins that demonstrated the extraordinary difficulty of the challenge. As Maya's shooting slot approached, atmospheric conditions had deteriorated to levels that would normally force cancellation of precision shooting competitions. Wind gusted erratically across the valley. Thermal currents created visible distortion effects, and temperature differentials had reached extremes that made ballistic calculation increasingly unreliable. Conditions are the worst we've seen in 6 years of this competition, Dr. Sarah Martinez announced to the gathered crowd. The remaining shooters face extraordinary challenges. Most of the remaining competitors were expressing doubts about attempting shots under such difficult conditions. Several had requested to postpone their attempts until morning, hoping for improved weather. Maya examined the atmospheric chaos through her binoculars, watching dust devils form and dissipate across the valley, observing thermal currents that bent light into shimmering waves and noting wind patterns that change direction every few minutes. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine appreciation for the complexity she observed. Jake stared at her in amazement. "Maya, these are the worst shooting conditions I've ever seen. Wind is gusting over 20 knots, thermal. Currents are creating optical distortion, and atmospheric pressure is dropping by the minute. How can you call this beautiful?" Maya lowered her binoculars and looked at Jake with the same steady confidence he had observed throughout their 18 months of training together. "Because chaos creates opportunities. When everything is unpredictable, predictable moments become more valuable." "Shooter number 37, Maya Chen, prepare for your attempt," the range officer announced over the public address system. Maya gathered her equipment and walked toward the firing position, carrying herself with quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the tension visible among other competitors. As she approached the shooting platform, conversations gradually quieted as 42 world-class shooters focused their attention on the young woman, who claimed she never missed. Maya's single quotes approach to the firing position drew the attention of every competitor, range official, and spectator present at the championship. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the visible tension among veteran shooters who had watched atmospheric conditions deteriorate throughout the day. "Equipment check," Jake announced, following Maya to the designated shooting platform. Their routine had been refined through hundreds of practice sessions, ensuring that every aspect of preparation would proceed smoothly despite the pressure of competition. Maya's custom Barrett .416 rifle was positioned carefully on the shooting rest, its precision-engineered components gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. The weapon represented the pinnacle of modern precision engineering, modified and adjusted to Maya's specific requirements through 18 months of intensive development. "Rifle secure," Maya reported, settling behind the weapon with practiced efficiency. Her position was textbook perfect, feet shoulder-width apart, body aligned behind the rifle. Support hand position to provide stable platform without introducing tension. Jake began his spotter's checklist, calling out environmental conditions and range information that would inform Maya's shooting solution. Range confirmed at 3798 meters. Target is visible and secure. Current wind speed 21 knots, gusting to 24 knots from the southwest. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, Maya studied the playing card that had defeated 41 world-class shooters over the past 8 hours. The ace of spades appeared impossibly small at 3,800 meters, wavering in thermal currents and wind that made precise aiming extraordinarily difficult. Atmospheric pressure 20-9-.7-6 inches and still dropping, Jake continued. Temperature differential 3.1 degrees, humidity 57%. These environmental readings would have concerned most precision shooters, representing conditions that made accurate shooting at extreme range virtually impossible. Maya processed the information as baseline data, while relying more heavily on direct observation of atmospheric behavior. "Wind patterns are complex," she noted, studying air movement across the valley through her rifle scope. Multiple thermal layers creating different wind speeds at various altitudes. Jake consulted his ballistic computer, calculating atmospheric compensation based on measured environmental conditions. Suggested windage adjustment is 4.7 minutes right. Elevation adjustment 2.2 minutes up to compensate for atmospheric pressure and temperature differential. Maya made the suggested scope adjustments, but continued studying atmospheric conditions through her optics. Her approach differed fundamentally from conventional ballistic calculation, incorporating environmental factors that couldn't be measured by instruments. Thermal currents are building, she observed, watching heat shimmer patterns that revealed air movement invisible to conventional observation. But they're creating predictable cycles as surface temperature stabilizes. Dr. Sarah Martinez monitored the attempt from the control station, her instruments providing real-time atmospheric data that confirmed the extraordinary difficulty of current shooting conditions. In 6 years of conducting the impossible shot challenge, she had never observed environmental variables this extreme. Current conditions exceed the theoretical limits for precision shooting at this range, Dr. Martinez announced to the gathered competitors. Wind speeds and atmospheric instability are at levels that would normally force competition postponement. Maya heard the announcement, but remained focused on her environmental assessment. Through her rifle scope, she was observing atmospheric behavior patterns that suggested moments of temporary stability might still occur despite the overall chaos. "Jake, I need 5 minutes to read the conditions," Maya said, maintaining her position behind the rifle while studying downrange environmental activity. Jake nodded, recognizing Maya's unique approach to atmospheric assessment. While other shooters relied primarily on instrument readings and ballistic calculations, Maya had developed an intuitive understanding of environmental behavior that allowed her to predict momentary stability. "Take your time," Jake replied. "No rush on this shot." Maya began her environmental analysis, studying wind patterns, thermal currents, and atmospheric pressure variations that would affect bullet flight over the 5.7-second journey to target. Her assessment process incorporated techniques that conventional precision shooting had never developed. Through her scope, Maya observed dust movement patterns that revealed wind behavior at ground level. Vegetation movement indicated air currents at various heights above terrain. Heat shimmer patterns showed thermal activity that could deflect bullets through temperature-induced air density variations. "Wind direction is shifting," Maya noted, watching vegetation response to changing air currents. Southwest wind is being influenced by thermal currents rising from sun-heated terrain. Jake monitored his instruments while Maya gathered environmental intelligence through direct observation. The combination of measured data and intuitive assessment provided comprehensive understanding of shooting conditions. "Atmospheric pressure continues dropping," Jake reported. "Rate of change suggests a weather front is approaching faster than forecast." Maya processed this information while maintaining her focus on environmental patterns visible through her rifle scope. Dropping atmospheric pressure would affect bullet velocity and trajectory, but it would also create predictable changes in air density that could be anticipated. "Thermal patterns are stabilizing," Maya observed after several minutes of careful study. "Surface temperature is reaching equilibrium, which will reduce thermal current intensity." This observation proved significant, as thermal currents had been creating some of the most unpredictable atmospheric disturbances throughout the afternoon. If thermal activity was indeed stabilizing, shooting conditions might briefly improve. Despite other challenging variables, wind speed holding steady at 21 knots, Jake noted, consulting his instruments. "Gusts are becoming less frequent, but more intense when they occur." Maya continued her environmental assessment, looking for patterns in the atmospheric chaos that might indicate when multiple variables would temporarily align in her favor. Her approach required patience and extraordinary observational skill, but it offered possibilities that conventional shooting techniques couldn't achieve. "I'm seeing cyclic patterns in the wind behavior," Maya announced after 10 minutes of careful observation. "Gusts are occurring in roughly 90-second intervals, with relative calm periods between." Jake verified this observation through his own instruments, noting that Maya's assessment of wind patterns aligned with measured data. Her ability to predict atmospheric behavior through observation continued to amaze him. Temperature differential is stabilizing, Maya added, noting that thermal current intensity was indeed decreasing as surface heating reached equilibrium. Thermal layers are becoming more uniform. These observations suggested that shooting conditions might briefly improve despite the overall challenging environment. Maya was identifying subtle environmental changes that could create a narrow window of opportunity for an accurate shot. Atmospheric pressure has stabilized, Jake reported, noting that the previous steady decline had paused. Pressure is holding at 20-9.7-4 inches. Maya processed this information while continuing to study downrange conditions through her rifle scope. Stable atmospheric pressure would eliminate one source of ballistic uncertainty, simplifying her shooting solution. "I'm seeing convergence," Maya announced, her voice carrying quiet excitement. "Multiple environmental variables are approaching. Temporary alignment." Jake focused his spotting scope on the target area, watching for the atmospheric stability that Maya was predicting. Through his optics, conditions still appeared chaotic and unpredictable. "Maya, I'm not seeing the stability you're describing," Jake said carefully. "Conditions still look extremely challenging." Maya's response reflected the environmental awareness she had developed through months of intensive training. The chaos is organizing itself. Wind patterns are becoming predictable, thermal currents are stabilizing, and atmospheric pressure has stopped changing. Everything is aligning for a perfect moment. Dr. Sarah Martinez monitored the extended preparation. Time with growing interest. Maya's patient approach differed from every previous competitor, who had attempted to minimize exposure to changing conditions by shooting as quickly as possible. "She's been in position for 15 minutes, Dr. Martinez noted to her assistants. Most shooters would have fired by now to avoid further atmospheric deterioration. But Maya was waiting for something that conventional precision shooting had never attempted to achieve. The perfect moment when atmospheric chaos temporarily organized itself into predictable patterns. Thermal currents are cycling into their stable phase, Maya announced, watching heat shimmer patterns through her scope. Wind gusts are following the predicted 90-second pattern. Atmospheric pressure is holding constant. Jake verified Maya's environmental assessment through his instruments, confirming that atmospheric conditions were indeed showing signs of temporary stability despite the overall challenging environment. All variables are approaching alignment. Maya continued, her breathing beginning to shift into the controlled pattern that preceded every shot. Environmental complexity is organizing into momentary simplicity. Through her rifle scope, Maya watched the playing cards stabilize as wind conditions temporarily moderated. Thermal currents that had been creating optical distortion were settling into predictable patterns. Atmospheric pressure held steady, eliminating ballistic uncertainty. "Now," Maya breathed, her finger finding the trigger's precise engagement. Point. The entire competition held its breath as Maya Chen prepared to attempt what 41 world-class shooters had failed to achieve. Under far better conditions, Maya's world compressed to a single point of crystalline focus. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, the ace of spades hung suspended in space and time, no longer dancing in thermal currents but held motionless in a pocket of atmospheric perfection that existed. For mere seconds, her heartbeat slowed to match the Earth's rotation. Her breathing synchronized with the wind's rhythm. Every muscle in her body relaxed except for the index finger that rested against 2 pounds and 14 ounces of precisely calibrated trigger resistance. Environmental convergence confirmed, Maya whispered, so quietly that only Jake could hear through her throat mic. All variables aligned. Wind steady at 18 knots, thermal current stable, atmospheric pressure constant. Jake's instruments confirmed what Maya felt through intuition and 18 months of obsessive preparation. For the first time all day, multiple atmospheric variables had temporarily canceled each other out, creating a narrow window of ballistic possibility. Target steady, Jake breathed into his spotter scope. Send it. Maya's finger applied pressure with surgical precision. The Barrett's firing pin struck the cartridge primer with mechanical certainty, igniting powder that had been measured to 0.02 grain accuracy. The 750 grain bullet accelerated down a barrel manufactured to laboratory tolerances, emerging at 2,700 feet per second into Montana's thin mountain air for 5.7 seconds. Physics and probability would determine whether Maya Chen had just accomplished the impossible. The rifle's recoil impulse traveled through Maya's body like controlled thunder, but she maintained perfect scope alignment, watching through her optics. As the playing card waited 3,800 meters downrange, the bullet was invisible in flight, its supersonic passage marked only by a brief sonic signature that echoed across the valley through the spotting scope. Jake tracked the bullet's theoretical trajectory, watching for impact signs in the white backdrop behind the target. The entire competition area fell silent except for the whisper of wind across mountain terrain. Flight time 4 seconds, Jake counted, his voice tight with concentration. 5 seconds. 6, the playing card exploded, not struck, not pierced. Not damaged, completely destroyed in a shower of paper fragments that scattered on the wind like confetti. The ace of spades simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a bullet traveling at velocities that turned paper into molecular dust. For 3 heartbeats, absolute silence held the competition area in suspended disbelief. 42 world-class shooters, dozens of range officials, and hundreds of spectators stared at an empty target frame where the impossible shot had just become reality. Then chaos erupted. Target destroyed. The range officer's voice cracked with excitement over the public address system. Confirmed hit. Maya Chen has completed the impossible shot. The crowd exploded in celebration, but Maya remained motionless behind her rifle, still focused through her scope on the empty target frame. Jake's binoculars trembled as he verified what his instruments had recorded. Perfect center hit, Jake reported, his voice filled with awe. The bullet struck dead center of the spade symbol. Maya, you didn't just hit the target, you obliterated it. Dr. Sarah Martinez stared at her instruments in complete bewilderment. Every calculation she had performed over 6 years of challenge. Design indicated that the shot was mathematically impossible under the atmospheric conditions present. Yet her high-speed cameras had recorded indisputable proof. Maya Chen's bullet had traveled 3,800 meters through chaotic atmospheric conditions and struck a target measuring 3.5 inches tall with perfect precision. This is impossible, Dr. Martinez muttered, scrolling through atmospheric data on her computer screen. Wind speeds, temperature differential, atmospheric pressure, every variable was beyond the theoretical limits for precision shooting at this range. But the empty target frame told a different story. Mathematics and theory had been defeated by a young woman who understood impossibility better than the experts who had designed the challenge. Marcus Webb approached Maya's shooting position with the expression of someone who had witnessed a miracle. As a 3-time world champion, Webb understood precision shooting well enough to recognize that what he had just observed transcended normal human capability. That shot shouldn't have been possible, Webb said simply. I've been shooting competitively for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Maya finally lifted her eye from the rifle scope, blinking as she readjusted to the world beyond her narrow field of focus. The celebration around her seemed surreal after the intense concentration required for her shot. It was possible, Maya replied quietly. Everything aligned perfectly for exactly the right moment. Tommy Martinez, whose previous near-miss had held the record for closest approach to completing the challenge, studied Maya with new understanding. You weren't trying to overcome the atmospheric conditions. You were waiting for them to work in your favor. Environmental variables aren't obstacles, Maya explained, her voice still calm despite the chaos around her. They're information. When you understand how they interact, you can recognize moments when complexity becomes simplicity. Dr. Sarah Martinez approached Maya's position, carrying printouts of atmospheric data and ballistic calculations that documented the extraordinary nature of her achievement. Miss Chen, according to every measurement we took, your shot was statistically impossible, Dr. Martinez said, consulting her data. Wind deflection alone should have pushed your bullet 18 inches off target. Temperature differential should have caused significant elevation error. How did you compensate for variables that couldn't be calculated? Maya's answer would be debated in precision shooting circles for years to come. I didn't compensate for the variables. I waited until they compensated for each other. The implications of Maya's achievement extended far beyond a single competition. For 6 years, the impossible shot had represented the absolute limits of human precision shooting capability. Maya had not just completed the challenge, she had demonstrated that those limits were based on incomplete understanding of atmospheric behavior and environmental interaction. Harold Kowalski pushed through the crowd surrounding Maya's shooting position, his weathered face showing emotions that ranged from pride to amazement. The gun shop owner who had first recognized Maya's potential 13 years earlier was witnessing the culmination of the most extraordinary shooting development in modern history. I knew you were special, Harold said, embracing Maya with fatherly affection. But this Maya, you've changed precision shooting forever. The official measurement process confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Maya's bullet had struck the exact center of the ace of spades symbol, obliterating the target with kinetic energy that scattered paper fragments across a 50-foot radius. High-speed photography captured the moment of impact, showing the playing card's complete destruction in slow-motion detail. Official confirmation, the range officer announced over the public address system. Maya Chen has successfully completed the impossible shot challenge, becoming the first person in 6 years of competition to hit the target. The celebration continued as competitors, officials, and spectators struggled to process what they had witnessed. Maya's achievement represented more than exceptional marksmanship, demonstrated a fundamental advancement in understanding atmospheric behavior and precision shooting technique. 3 hours after Maya's historic shot, the competition area had transformed into an impromptu symposium on precision shooting technique. Competitors who had previously dismissed Maya's unconventional approach now sought to understand the methods that had enabled her impossible achievement. The key was environmental synchronization, Maya explained to a gathering of world-class shooters, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just redefined the possible. Instead of fighting atmospheric variables, I learned to work with their natural patterns. Dr. Sarah Martinez had spent the afternoon analyzing atmospheric data from Maya's shot, searching for explanations that aligned with known ballistic science. Her discoveries were challenging fundamental assumptions about precision shooting at extreme ranges. According to our measurements, atmospheric conditions during Maya's shot were actually more challenging than most previous attempts, Dr. Martinez reported to the assembled group. Wind speeds were higher, temperature differentials were greater, and atmospheric pressure was less stable. Yet she achieved perfect accuracy under conditions that should have made the shot impossible. Eric Larson raised the question that every competitor was considering. How do we learn to read atmospheric conditions the way Maya does? What techniques can be taught to other shooters? Maya's response revealed the depth of preparation that had enabled her achievement. Environmental awareness can be developed, but it requires fundamental changes in how you approach precision shooting. Most shooters try to minimize variables through calculation and compensation. I learned to maximize understanding of variables until I could predict their interaction. Jake Morrison, who had observed Maya's development more closely than anyone else, offered additional insight into her training methods. Maya spent 18 months learning to feel atmospheric conditions instead of just measuring them. She developed sensory awareness that allowed her to predict environmental changes before instruments could detect them. The gathered shooters listened with rapt attention as Maya and Jake described training techniques that challenged conventional precision shooting wisdom. Instead of relying primarily on ballistic computers and weather instruments, Maya had learned to integrate sensory observation with calculated data. Atmospheric conditions aren't random, Maya continued. They follow patterns that can be observed and predicted. Wind gusts occur in cycles, thermal currents respond to temperature changes in predictable ways, and atmospheric pressure variations create recognizable effects on air density. Alexandra Petrov, whose military background included classified long-range missions, recognized the implications of Maya's techniques. You've developed capabilities that could revolutionize military sniper training. Environmental awareness at this level would provide significant tactical advantages. But Maya's interests extended beyond military applications. Her achievement had demonstrated that human precision shooting capability was far greater than previously understood, opening possibilities for advancement across multiple disciplines. This isn't about military applications, Maya clarified. It's about understanding the relationship between human capability and environmental conditions. We've been accepting artificial limitations based on incomplete knowledge. Dr. Martinez consulted her data printouts, still struggling to reconcile Maya's success with established ballistic science. Your shot defied every mathematical model we use for long-range ballistics. How do we incorporate environmental synchronization into precision shooting theory? You start by questioning assumptions, Maya replied. Ballistic science assumes that environmental variables are obstacles to overcome. What if they're actually tools to utilize? This philosophical shift represented a fundamental challenge to precision shooting orthodoxy. For decades, long-range shooting had focused on minimizing environmental influence through technological advancement and mathematical compensation. Maya was suggesting that environmental influence could be harnessed rather than defeated. Carlos Mendez, whose shooting school had trained hundreds of precision marksmen, recognized the revolutionary nature of Maya's approach. You're describing a completely different paradigm for precision shooting instruction. Instead of teaching students to fight conditions, we should teach them to work with conditions. Environmental partnership instead of environmental conquest, Maya agreed. Atmospheric conditions aren't enemies to defeat, they're partners to understand. The discussion continued as competitors shared observations from their own attempts, comparing conventional shooting techniques with Maya's environmental synchronization approach. The consensus was clear. Maya had discovered capabilities that could transform precision shooting at every level. Thomas Brennan, whose near-miss had been the day's second closest attempt, offered his assessment. Maya didn't just complete an impossible shot. She proved that our definition of impossible was based on incomplete understanding. As evening approached, the impromptu educational session began to wind down. But the implications of Maya's achievement would resonate throughout the precision shooting community for years to come. Her success had opened possibilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability and environmental interaction. 6 months after Maya Chen's historic achievement, the precision shooting world had been transformed. The impossible shot challenge was officially retired, replaced by increasingly sophisticated tests that incorporated Maya's environmental synchronization techniques. Maya herself had become the most sought-after instructor in precision shooting, establishing a training center in Montana that attracted military units, law enforcement agencies, and competitive shooters from around the world. Her methods were being studied, adapted, and refined by shooting instructors across multiple disciplines. Environmental awareness has become the new frontier in precision shooting. Dr. Sarah Martinez explained to a group of military training officers visiting Maya's facility. Traditional ballistic calculation remains important, but environmental synchronization has opened capabilities we never thought possible. Maya's training facility featured innovative environmental simulation systems that could recreate atmospheric conditions from around the world. Students learned to recognize atmospheric patterns, predict environmental changes, and synchronize. They're shooting with natural cycles that most marksmen never noticed. The goal isn't to become a better calculator, Maya explained to a class of advanced students. It's to become a better observer. Atmospheric conditions provide more information than any computer if you learn to read them correctly. Jake Morrison had become Maya's chief instructor, teaching environmental awareness techniques to students who arrive with conventional precision shooting backgrounds. The transformation process typically required months of intensive training to overcome years of instrument-dependent habits. Most students arrive believing that technology provides better environmental information than human observation. Jake noted during a training session, Maya's achievement proved that human awareness, properly developed, can exceed technological capability. The military applications of Maya's techniques had proven particularly significant. Special operations units reported dramatic improvements in long-range shooting capability after incorporating environmental synchronization training into their curricula. Maya's methods have revolutionized our sniper training program, reported Colonel Patricia Hayes, whose Marine Corps unit had adopted environmental awareness techniques 6 months earlier. Our shooters are achieving accuracy levels that we previously considered impossible. But Maya's influence extended beyond military and competitive shooting. Her demonstration that human capability could exceed technological limitation had inspired research in other fields requiring extraordinary precision under challenging conditions. Environmental synchronization principles apply to any discipline where human performance must adapt to natural conditions, explained Dr. Robert Chun, a sports psychology researcher studying Maya's training methods. We're seeing applications in sailing, aviation, and even surgical procedures. Maya's achievement had also inspired a new generation of precision shooters who approached the discipline with fundamentally different assumptions about human capability and environmental interaction. Maya proved that impossible is just another word for misunderstood, observed Sarah Williams, a young shooter whose training had been based entirely on environmental synchronization principles. When you understand atmospheric conditions well enough, they become tools instead of obstacles. The precision shooting community continued debating the implications of Maya's historic achievement. Some traditionalists argued that her success was unique to her individual capabilities and couldn't be systematically taught to other shooters. Environmental synchronization requires sensory awareness that may not be developable in most people, suggested Marcus Webb during a competitive shooting symposium. Maya's achievement might be impossible to replicate, but evidence from Maya's training facility suggested otherwise. Students with no previous shooting experience were developing environmental awareness capabilities that enabled precision shooting achievements previously considered beyond amateur reach. We're consistently producing shooters who exceed traditional accuracy expectations, Maya reported to the Precision Shooting Advisory Board. Environmental synchronization can be taught if instructors understand the proper techniques. Harold Kowalski, now in his 70s, had become something of a celebrity in precision shooting circles as the man who had first recognized Maya's potential. His gun shop in Missoula had become a pilgrimage site for shooting enthusiasts seeking to understand the origins of environmental synchronization techniques. I knew Maya was special from the beginning, Harold reflected during an interview with Precision Shooting magazine. But I never imagined she would change our entire understanding of what's possible. The retired Barrett firearms engineer often visited Maya's training facility, observing techniques that challenged everything he had learned during decades in the precision shooting industry. Maya's students are achieving capabilities that our best engineers said were impossible, Harold noted with amazement. She's proven that human potential exceeds technological limitation when properly developed. 2 years after Maya Chen's legendary shot, the precision shooting world had been permanently transformed. The techniques she pioneered were being taught in military academies, law enforcement training centers, and competitive shooting schools across 6 continents. Maya stood on the same rocky outcrop where she had achieved the impossible, now serving as the primary instructor for an advanced environmental synchronization course. Her students included Olympic champions, military snipers, and competitive shooters who traveled from around the world to learn her revolutionary methods. Environmental synchronization isn't a shooting technique, Maya explained to her current class of 30 advanced students. It's a way of understanding the relationship between human capability and natural conditions. When you learn to work with atmospheric variables instead of fighting them, limitations become opportunities. The original impossible shot target frame had been preserved as a monument to human achievement, though the challenge itself had been replaced by increasingly sophisticated tests that incorporated environmental synchronization principles. Maya's obliteration of the ace of spades remained the only successful completion in the challenge's history. Dr. Sarah Martinez, now director of the International Precision Shooting Research Institute, had spent 2 years studying the implications of Maya's achievement. Her research had led to fundamental advances in ballistic science and atmospheric modeling. Maya's shot forced us to completely revise our understanding of long-range ballistics, Dr. Martinez explained during the scientific conference on precision shooting. We discovered that atmospheric conditions follow patterns we had never recognized, creating opportunities for precision that we had dismissed as impossible. The scientific community had embraced Maya's demonstration that human observation could exceed instrumental measurement under certain conditions. Research programs were exploring applications of environmental synchronization principles in fields ranging from aviation to surgical procedures. Maya proved that human sensory capability, properly developed, can detect environmental patterns that our most sophisticated instruments miss, noted Dr. Jennifer Park, whose research focused on human-environmental interaction. She's opened entirely new fields of scientific investigation. Jake Morrison had become one of the world's leading experts on environmental awareness training, developing curricula that were being adopted by military units and law enforcement agencies globally. His partnership with Maya had evolved into a comprehensive educational system that was transforming precision shooting instruction. Traditional shooting instruction focused on minimizing environmental influence, Jake explained to a group of military training officers. Maya's approach teaches shooters to maximize environmental understanding until they can recognize moments when complex conditions become simple. The psychological aspects of Maya's achievement had proven as significant as the technical innovations. Her demonstration that supposedly impossible goals could be achieved through deeper understanding had inspired advancement across multiple disciplines. Maya's shot represents more than extraordinary marksmanship, observed sports psychologist Dr. Amanda Chun. It demonstrates that human limitations are often based on incomplete knowledge rather than actual capability boundaries. Maya's training facility had become a research center where atmospheric scientists, ballistic engineers, and shooting instructors collaborated to advance understanding of human-environmental interaction. The interdisciplinary approach was producing innovations that benefited multiple fields. We're discovering that atmospheric behavior follows patterns that conventional meteorology never recognized, explained Dr. Michael Torres, an atmospheric scientist working with Maya's team. Understanding these patterns has applications far beyond precision shooting. The competitive shooting community had embraced environmental synchronization techniques, leading to accuracy achievements that would have been considered impossible. Before Maya's demonstration, competition records were being broken regularly as shooters learned to work with atmospheric conditions rather than fighting them. Maya's influence has elevated the entire sport, noted competitive shooting champion Lisa Anderson. Shooters are achieving accuracy levels that seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. But perhaps Maya's greatest legacy was the philosophical transformation she had brought to precision shooting. Her demonstration that environmental conditions could be partners rather than obstacles had changed how shooters approach their craft. Maya taught us that the atmosphere isn't something to overcome, reflected Harold Kowalski during his final interview before retirement. It's something to understand, respect, and work with. That understanding has applications far beyond shooting. 5 years after the impossible became possible, Maya Chen stood before an audience of 2,000 precision shooting enthusiasts at the International Marksmanship Symposium. Her achievement had grown from a single legendary shot into a worldwide movement that was transforming multiple disciplines. 5 years ago, I fired a bullet at a playing card, positioned 3,800 meters away. Maya began, her voice carrying easily across the packed auditorium. That shot took 5.7 seconds to reach its target, but its impact has been traveling ever since. The audience included Olympic champions, military leaders, scientists, and shooting enthusiasts from around the world, all gathered to celebrate the anniversary of the shot that had redefined human capability. The impossible shot wasn't about proving I was a better marksman than the 41 shooters who attempted it before me, Maya continued. It was about proving that our understanding of possibility was incomplete. Maya's training methods were now taught in military academies across 6 continents, incorporated into Olympic training programs, and studied by researchers investigating human-environmental interaction. Her demonstration that atmospheric conditions could be harnessed rather than defeated had applications far beyond precision shooting. Environmental synchronization has revolutionized how we approach any challenge that requires human performance under natural conditions, Maya explained. From surgical procedures to aviation to competitive sailing, the principles remain the same. Understand the environment well enough to work with it instead of against it. The audience listened with rapt attention as Maya described the ongoing research inspired by her achievement. Scientific teams were investigating atmospheric patterns that conventional meteorology had never recognized, discovering environmental cycles that affected everything from aircraft flight paths to agricultural productivity. My shot proved that human observation, properly developed, can detect patterns that our most sophisticated instruments miss, Maya noted. We're discovering that the natural world provides more information than we ever realized if we learn to read it correctly. Jake Morrison, now Director of Environmental Awareness Training for the International Precision Shooting Association, had documented thousands of students who had achieved accuracy levels previously considered impossible after learning Maya's techniques. Maya's legacy isn't just the shot itself, Jake reflected during his introduction of Maya to the symposium audience. It's the thousands of shooters who have discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. Dr. Sarah Martinez, whose ballistic research had been transformed by Maya's achievement, presented scientific findings that continued to challenge conventional understanding of precision shooting limitations. Maya's shot forced us to completely revise our mathematical models of long-range ballistics, Dr. Martinez reported to the symposium. We discovered that atmospheric conditions create opportunities for precision that our equations had dismissed as impossible. Harold Kowalski, now 80 years old, had traveled from Montana to attend the anniversary celebration. The retired gun shop owner who had first recognized Maya's potential remained amazed by the worldwide impact of her achievement. When I taught an 8-year-old girl to shoot in my basement 13 years ago, I never imagined she would change the world. Harold reflected during his remarks to the symposium. Maya proved that human potential exceeds every limitation we think we understand. Maya's closing remarks to the symposium audience emphasized the ongoing nature of her mission. The impossible shot had been just the beginning of a larger exploration of human capability and environmental interaction. 5 years ago, I proved that one impossible thing was actually possible, Maya concluded. But there are still impossible things waiting to be understood, limitations waiting to be challenged, and possibilities waiting to be discovered. Environmental synchronization isn't the end of human advancement in precision shooting, it's the beginning. We've learned to work with atmospheric conditions, but there are deeper patterns still to discover, more subtle environmental relationships still to understand. Maya paused, looking out over an audience that included some of the world's most accomplished marksmen, all inspired by her demonstration that impossible was just another word for misunderstood. The shot I fired 5 years ago traveled 3,800 meters in 5.7 seconds, Maya said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. But the ideas it represented are still traveling, still inspiring new discoveries, still proving that human capability exceeds every boundary we think we know. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for believing that impossible is just the starting point for understanding what's really possible. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes, but Maya's legacy would last forever. Maya's single quotes story reminds us that the word impossible is often just another way of saying not yet understood. Her achievement wasn't just about exceptional marksmanship. It was about challenging our assumptions about what humans can accomplish when they truly understand their environment. This has been an incredible storytelling journey, and I want to thank you for staying with us through every twist, turn, and breathless moment. Creating content like this, researching the technical details, crafting compelling characters, and weaving together a narrative that spans nearly the length of a full novel takes enormous time and dedication. If this story captured your imagination, inspired you, or simply entertained you for the past few hours, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take just a moment to hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed this epic tale. Share this story with friends who love great storytelling. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible full-length stories like this one. Ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest releases. Your support means everything to creators like us. It's what allows us to spend weeks researching, writing, and producing these detailed, novel-length stories that transport you to different worlds and introduce you to unforgettable characters. We have so many more amazing stories planned, tales of adventure, mystery, science fiction, and human triumph that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Some will be shorter, some even longer, but all will be crafted with the same attention to detail and commitment to quality storytelling that you experience today. What did you think of Maya's journey? Did her achievement inspire you to reconsider your own impossible challenges? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing from our community. Until next time, remember, impossible is just another word for not yet understood. Keep pushing boundaries, keep questioning limitations, and never forget that the most extraordinary achievements often come from seeing the world in an entirely new way. Thanks for being part of this incredible story. We'll see you in the next adventure.